you know, it's kind of those things that it's like one of those things that nobody has to answer, and it's really hard to define because it's just like this weird thing that seemed to just happen, and I don't even know if anyone was in control.
In the year 1990, photography student and artist Kathleen Hanna would reach out to Tobi Vail with the idea of starting a female punk band. This band would spark an entire movement. This is Riot Grrrl. Punk rock is a music genre that emerged in the mid-1970s, rooted in 1960s garage rock. They typically produce short, fast-paced songs with hard-edged melodies and singing styles, stripped-down instrumentation, and often shouted political, anti-establishment lyrics. Punk embraces a DIY ethic, meaning many bands self-produced their recordings and distributed them through independent record labels. Bands such as Bad Religion, the Ramones, and the Sex Pistols would dominate this era. However, in Olympia, Washington, many feminist activists began forming loud, abrasive bands. Faced with no space in the existing punk scene, they turned their attention to tackling sexism and began to carve out their own underground alternative. The Riot Grrrl movement arose through underground publications commonly referred to as zines, which was a shortened version of the word fanzines. These distributed texts and images focused on social and political activism and became popular in the 1960s. They discussed topics that were considered taboo in mainstream culture, such as incest, rape, and eating disorders. Thought to be untouched by corporate structure, the zine served as a way for women to connect with one another through shared interests and experiences. However, in the 1990s, the feminist punk scene boosted the medium and the slogan of girl power, which would eventually become the inspiration behind the declaration that society offered no validation to the experiences of women and their creativity. Kathleen Hanna and Tobi Vail would propel this misunderstood subculture. Politically, the Riot Grrrl movement blasted feminism into the future. Musically, the movement encouraged women to be more involved in the male-dominated punk scene. Women began to create their own zines and to share ideas through small meetings. This would eventually lead to the spreading of the Riot Grrrl movement nationwide through the development of local Riot Grrrl chapters and eventual nationwide conventions. The first of which was held at the International Pop Underground Convention in Washington, D.C.
It was pretty intense, and as it turned out, they just wanted to hang out and talk without men being there.
They wanted to talk about sexual abuse, they wanted to talk about coming out and get information and share information with each other.
Through their efforts, the popular bands of the genre, such as Bikini Kill, Bratmobile, and Heavens to Betsy, would defy social constructs based on their gender identity and work towards the common goal of boycotting record labels by producing their own underground recordings and ignoring mainstream media in their pursuit to produce music that defied societal norms. While no official stamp or oath made a band one of the Riot Grrrl genre, the bands all contained members who identified as such or sang about feminist issues. Credited with the instigation of the Riot Grrrl movement, Bikini Kill released their debut album, Revolution Girl Style Now, in September of 1993, with controversial titles such as Suck My Left One. The band's music was a lyrical combat mobilization for a marginalized but equally fierce female culture. The band was renowned for their controversial political lyrics and their confrontational live shows. With Tobi on drums and Kathleen on lead vocals, the band would go on to write Rebel Girl, which would become known as the definitive Riot Grrrl anthem, with lyrics that mock the patronizing of the patriarchy. The debut album is a power punk feminist-fueled siren call to the hearts of rebellious girls across the country. However, as the popularity of the movement started to spread, so did the criticisms from mainstream media outlets. Often seen as angry man-haters, their feminist ideas were likened to that of violent female gangs, hell-bent on terrorizing the country with morally corrupt intentions. Reporters sought to question the credibility of bands involved in the Riot Grrrl genre, and often wrote about them in an antagonistic manner.
USA Today reporter came and then wrote this really condescending thing about what we were doing and focused on what our clothes look like and what our bodies look like.
Although the members of Bikini Kill would dispute these characterizations by explaining their desire to create a platform of awareness for subjects that were not commonly discussed in mainstream media, the bands of the Riot Grrrl genre were rarely left untouched by media criticism. By the late 90s, the girl power anthem would become appropriated by female pop groups like the Spice Girls. A true contrast to the Riot Grrrl agenda, many people believe that this was the downfall of the movement, as it created a narrative that subconsciously catered to men. However, while many might argue that the Riot Grrrl movement was dead by the late 90s, there is little doubt that the mentality behind the music lives on. It's important to note that while most of the Riot Grrrl era artists continue to create music today, there has been a resurgence in these type of bands, being just as vocal as they were in the 90s in their criticisms of political topics, such as racism, homophobia, mental health issues, and sexual assault. With the rise of newer punk artists such as the Linda Lindas, and a personal favorite, Destroy Boys,
Hunting witches turn into hunting bitches. For some reason I can't seem to relax. Do me a favor and find out the facts before you come to my door, ready to attack.
there is an undeniable presence of the Riot Grrrl movement in today's music, and despite the evolution of the presentation, the commonality remains the same: politics and the determination to defeat oppressive powers. So it would seem the question shouldn't be whether or not the Riot Grrrl movement is obsolete, but rather what we can expect from the ambition of the artists beyond the movement and the newly defined feminism of the 21st century.